welcome to On the Media's very first live stream ever.
Good afternoon, I'm Joe Baker, a member of the Delaware Tribe of Indians.
Good evening, I'm Terrance McKnight. I'm the evening host on WQXR. But tonight, I'm here with the Green Space team to bring you a very special performance by the Harlem Chamber Players. You're gonna hear some music by composers whose names you've gotten to know over the recent years. Composers like George Walker, Trevor Weston, Carlos Simon, Jessie Montgomery. We're gonna start with a woman whose documentary we've been playing for the last 7 years and who made it to the classical countdown on WQXR this year, Florence Price. We're gonna start with a piece that she composed 1927 after moving to Chicago, her first string quartet. So here we are, recorded live in the Green Space, the Harlem Chamber Players String Quartet, playing the String Quartet #1. This is by Florence Price. String Quartet #1 by Florence Price, recorded in the green space by the Harlem Chamber Players String Quartet. Ashley Horne, Sarah Chan, Amadi Azikiwe, and Wayne Smith, the members of the quartet performing for us tonight from the green space. I'm Terrance McKnight here with you. And for the next little bit, we're gonna hear music by George Walker. We'll hear from Carlos Simon. We've got a composition by Jessie Montgomery and Trevor Weston. Some conversation now with Amadi Azikiwe from the quartet and Liz Player, who's the founder of the Harlem Chamber Players. Thanks for joining me, you all.
Thank you. Good to see you, Terrance.
Thank you.
Now, Black History Month is typically a big deal for Harlem Chamber Players, you know, live performances, Schomburg Center venues around the city of New York. Things have had to change for the Harlem Chamber Players this year, as for most ensembles and most orchestras and most performers here in the city and around the country. So let's talk about tonight's program. Tonight we're going to hear from Trevor Weston, and I know that there was another piece by Trevor that had been programmed, but we had a change of program to get in another piece of his. We're going to speak to him later, but I want to start with this Florence Price Quartet. Initially, I said it was 27, but she wrote this 2 years after moving to Chicago. She moved there in 27. She wrote this piece in 29, and you know, some of her friends included Margaret Bonds and her mom and all those musicians associated with the National Association of Negro Musicians, such an important organization. And move forward, we come to something like the Gateways Music Festival that was formed in 1993. That became so important in Rochester, New York, for bringing music to the community. And a lot of this music was by Black composers. Amadi, you grew up surrounded by that festival. And earlier tonight, you were talking about the fact that Florence Price, you know, it's not a new name for you. This isn't the first piece of music by Florence that you've played. So tell us a little bit about Gateways. Some of our listeners know about Gateways. Tell us a little bit about Gateways and your kind of reflection on Florence Price.
The Gateways Festival started in 1993 in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. It highlights the historic visibility and contributions of orchestral, classical musicians of African descent, founded by the pianist Arminta Adams Dumisani, who happens to also be mom. You could also call the festival Arminta's friends, colleagues. So many of the protagonists from the 60s and the 70s, Sanford Allen, first Black member of the New York Philharmonic, was a guest at the very first Gateways. So what we saw was just a collective lifting up and a collective statement. And it's all, you know, every single Gateways, when you have a whole orchestra together, everyone is still amazed that there are that many of us out there who are performing and playing. So it also then provides, and I don't know that this could have been anticipated, but a very robust networking and fellowship experience. So it's just invaluable. And I think it has exceeded even beyond what Mom has thought, although she still keeps an eye on it. She's like the godmother still. I'll say that. I think I can say that and not get in trouble. Sorry, Lee, if you're watching. Yeah, so it's important for our psyche. We, as you know, musicians of color, might not even realize what we psychologically experience, you know, what the thorough experience. We might not sit and think, but if you go years and years thinking, wow, I'm one of a few, or maybe the only one in my city, the only one in my state, the only one in this orchestra. Yeah, there's something that is incredibly reassuring when you go to Gateways and you see that. And I feel like it's very much the same with the Harlem Chamber Players.
Harlem Chamber Players, when I think of the Harlem Chamber Players, Liz, I often just reflect back to another association that Arminta had, and that was with the Symphony of the New World, the first integrated orchestra in the professional orchestra in the country that started right there in New York in the 1960s. She was affiliated with that orchestra. Other names that our listeners know, Coleridge Taylor Perkinson, we did a special on him. James DePriest was another conductor with that orchestra. Benjamin Steinberg, the first conductor. This integrated orchestra, Liz, is something that the Chamber Players is, without really advertising that fact. It just is. Tell us about the Harlem Chamber Players, how you designed it, and the kind of work that you're doing, and why someone like Florence Price or Jessie Montgomery or Trevor Weston is so important to the work of the players.
Sure, absolutely. We founded the Harlem Chamber Players in 2008, but there's a history of Black orchestras before us, and I'm very late to the game. I didn't grow up like Amadi with a mother who was versed in classical music and introduced me to Black composers. I played the clarinet at the age of 11, and I listened to composers like Brahms and Mozart. And a whole new world opened up to me when I discovered all these Black composers. And I didn't know about the Symphony of the New World. Actually, it was Janet Wolfe who founded the New York City Housing Authority Symphony Orchestra back in 1971. And I was playing the clarinet, and I met her at one of her galas that she had at Weill Recital Hall at Carnegie Hall. And she was the main inspiration behind my founding the Harlem Chamber Players, along with a partner that I worked with back then, Charles Dalton, who is no longer with us, but Janet Wolfe was the main inspiration. And I remember being the only one playing in youth symphony orchestras. And it wasn't until, and I came late, it wasn't until the 90s that I played in the Housing Symphony Orchestra. And I was surrounded by people who looked like me. And it was a wonderful orchestra, and it was just so uplifting. And so from the very beginning, this is our 13th annual Black History Month concert. We've had a Black History Month concert every year of our existence, and this is our 13th season. And I started learning more about more Black composers through you. So it's important that we program Florence Price, and it's just a wonderful discovery, and playing music by contemporary living composers like Jessie Montgomery, Trevor Weston, who's here with us, Carlos Simon. I'm late, but it's just been a joyous experience discovering this music, and I'm happy to present it.
And you've had some great partners, Harlem School of the Arts, and now you've brought on the Brooklyn Public Library as a collaborator for tonight. Tell us about that collaboration.
Oh, yes. Actually, this concert, we were supposed to premiere it this coming Sunday, February 28th, in partnership with the Brooklyn Public Library. But then when I found out that the Green Space was interested in premiering this concert, we switched everything around. So what you're hearing tonight, actually the quartet had 3.5 days to rehearse all this music. So we had to hustle and make a few changes to adjust to the compressed schedule, but that's what happened. And I'm just very happy that the Brooklyn Public Library is co-presenting this with the Green Space, and just honored to be here.
Amadi, ready our ears for this next piece we're going to hear. It's by Jessie Montgomery. It's a piece called Strum.
Okay, as the title would imply, we all do a lot of strumming. What is strumming? That is when you are playing pizzicato across the fingerboard, and you are playing two or more strings, let's say. And it starts out, it's a wonderful piece. Starts out quite slow, kind of meditative, but also it's also pizzicato. Starts with the viola solo, so you're going to hear me start. Um, and it's kind of an irregular meter, and then the cello joins with this very kind of calm, again meditative, but in a different way. It's almost like a chant. Very, very spiritual. You know, once I conducted the string orchestra version of this, and when you add the double bass, somehow the rhythms, their dance rhythms, it sounds quite African. I haven't talked with Jessie about this, but that was my personal impression. So the piece is in several sections, starting with a sort of a moderate one, and it grows in speed each section. And the last part is incredibly fast and very exciting. So it's got everything you could want: sharp rhythms, dialogue. It's a wonder. I don't know how many years I've been associated with it, maybe 12 or so. I think just right after she wrote it, probably.
Okay, well, let's hear it. This is Strum by Jessie Montgomery, and then we'll go straight into Elegy, A Cry from the Grave by Carlos Simon. You just heard A Cry from the Grave, an elegy that's by Carlos Simon. I know we said we were going to bring you the Jessie Montgomery piece, but we're going to bring it to you now. We wanted to give you Carlos Simon. And just a little personal note about that composer. He's a professor at Georgetown these days. When I met him, he was my piano student. Before I came to New York, I was teaching at Morehouse, and in walked a student for keyboard skills. And one thing I could say about Carlos, he was always on time. He was always prepared. He was always serious about his work. And these days he, allows his work to speak for him. And I couldn't be more proud of one of my students, Carlos Simon. So I'm glad that you got a chance to hear his work played in the green space. And so now we go to the Harlem Chamber Players Quartet, strumming away on this composition by Jessie Montgomery. Chamber Players String Quartet, Ashley Horne, Claire Chan, Amadi Azikiwe, Wayne Smith, playing music by Jessie Montgomery, her composition Strum. Just before that, we heard an Elegy by Carlos Simon. I'm Terrance McKnight. We recorded this music in the green space at New York Public Radio. We're going to continue with this celebration, this concert by the Harlem Chamber Players in collaboration with the Brooklyn Public Library. Our next music is going to be by Trevor Weston. Now, you may not recognize his name immediately, but you know his work because for the last 7 years, we've been playing a documentary on Florence Price, The Price of Admission. And when I first started working on that piece, one of the first people I talked to was Trevor Weston because of his scholarship around Florence Price. And when Florence composed her piano concerto, that score went missing. Trevor's job was to put it back together so we could finally hear that music, that piano concerto. And that was one of our early conversations about Florence Price. So when you hear the special, you know Trevor's work putting together that concerto. So Trevor, thanks for joining us here in the special program for the Harlem Chamber Players, sir.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here. Glad to see you.
Yeah, man. So that special was about, I worked on that back in 2011. In 2012, you wrote the music that we're about to hear now. Tell us about this piece.
Yeah, Fudo Myoo, it's a piece I wrote for the Amadi String Quartet. And they wanted a piece that could be paired with pieces by composers who either perished in a concentration camp or who fled Nazi Germany because of the concentration camps. So I decided to write a piece that had to do with social justice. And the first thing that came to mind was something I used to do in college. I went to Tufts near Boston, and once a month I would go to the MFA to look at the statue of Fudo Myoo, who is a Buddhist figure. And I love this statue because it's a menacing figure with a sword and a rope. But what intrigued me was the fact that his job was to fight ignorance with wisdom. And so I would go there once a month to remind myself that the way to fight ignorance is through wisdom, not yelling, not violence. It's through wisdom. And there was fire behind him. So when I decided to write a piece dealing with social justice, I wanted to write a piece that maybe represented how we fight for justice, kind of righteous indignation, as it were.
Mm-hmm. So that was almost 10 years ago.
Yes.
So when you look back at the language, your musical language, the choices that you made then, and you look at where we are, the injustices in our society now, how do you review your work? How do you look back at your past self?
Well, I do think that embedded in the music are elements of how I think Black music has fought back against injustice. So one of the things that has always interested me in music is actually DJ scratching. You won't kind of think about DJ scratching when you hear the piece, but all of the rhythmic interruptions to me is kind of that energetic kind of righteous wisdom, kind of fighting against, what seems to be oppression. And I think that embedding in my music some element of the tradition, in African-American tradition, African-American music, is a way for me to kind of remind myself that people have always performed their music as a way of resistance. So thinking about 2012 and where we are now, I don't think that Fudo Myoo was necessarily fighting anything. I think it was, in a way, doing exercises, as it were. And maybe now it's time to take some of those elements and use them more overtly to kind of affect the mind. But I do know that at a time where things seemed relatively calm, 2012, I was thinking about, this issue of interruption, which is part of the tradition, but specifically with DJs who are turning back time, bending time, interrupting time. And to me, that always seemed like an act of kind of defiance. If you can make time change, then you can do anything. So I think that's embedded in the music and something I'm definitely thinking about exploring a little more obviously in the future.
Yeah. Now this piece takes about 7 minutes to perform.
Mm-hmm.
And when we want to listen to it with you, what specifically are you going to be listening for in the chamber players' interpretation of your music? Are there certain little things that you're anxious to hear?
That's actually a really great question, because I think there are things that I want to hear that may not be important for the piece, but my favorite moment occurs near the end when Fudo Myoo actually start to subdue the energy, where the same chords from the beginning become this compound meter dance. It starts to swing more. And then there's some glissandi, and I love the glissandi. I just love how they seem to melt things. And gradually all of that energy kind of just melts down into a puddle of now subdued energy. So that's what I listen for.
Cool, man. It's a Black History Month celebration from the Green Space with the Harlem Chamber Players. Here is that quartet by Trevor Weston, Fudo Myoo. Fudo, Myoo, formed by the Harlem Chamber Players String Quartet. That's music by Trevor Weston. He's with us. I'm Terrance McKnight. This performance recorded in the Green Space at New York Public Radio. Amadi Azikiwe is with us. He's the violist in the group. Amadi,
Yes,
wow,
sir.
that's a lot, man. Reflections on this piece you just played.
I love it. We all loved it. New language for us. And so we appreciate the challenge and the demands. Trevor, you should know that. I didn't say that yet, but learning this piece forced us to listen in a different way, forced us to become familiar with the unfamiliar and embrace it. So I said it's like we're on a mission. That's true. And I think we felt the importance of what you're saying, and we took it as our own voice, and that includes all the nuances. For the listeners, we have a series of, as you heard, of sort of glissandos. Not only did we slide, we have to listen to what else is going on, and we have to make sure the rhythm is correct. We don't often do that, things like that. So we're glad to be able to hone our skills even further. And I think it's just pure exciting music, interesting. It's an ideal work of chamber music, Trevor. So
Wow, I'm honored.
being very honest when I say that. Yeah.
Well, thank you. You guys did a fantastic job. And I play a little bit piano, organ, and I used to sing a lot. And I always liked pieces that I felt were like puzzles. And the more I put into it, the more I got out of it. So I hope to think that like my better pieces, create that situation for the players. Like, oh, okay, this makes sense. Okay, oh, I get this. Oh, okay, he's doing that again. Okay, got it. So that's great to hear. That's great to hear their journey.
He did exactly. That was exactly the case, except for that one part. No, there was no one.
Well, there's one part for me. That's the other issue. Like, oh, maybe I should have changed that note, but that's okay. It's all right.
I was good, except for the viola part. Oh,
except
man.
the viola part.
Now we're joined. Liz Player is on this call with us. Liz Player is the founder of the Harlem Chamber Players. Liz, how do you make these choices? So much music out there. How did you get turned on to this piece by Trevor?
I went to Trevor Weston's website and I listened to that piece and I was immediately intrigued. But then when I read the notes, when I found out what it was about, I was thinking about the Carlos Simon piece that was to precede this one, Elegy, A Cry from the Grave. And, that one is dedicated to victims of police brutality. And I was thinking, well, it would be nice to follow it with this indignation and, fighting ignorance. And so that's what came to mind. I just wanted there to be a little bit of a story in this program, as well as a celebration of Black composers.
Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit more, Liz, about that. I don't think that you just described about this story and about Harlem Chamber Players meeting a moment around social activism or what's happening in our culture. This isn't a one-off for you. This is a larger kind of picture for you with this group. Yes?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, we're in our 13th season and we want to continue, but it's just very important because in classical music, I always thought it was a European art form. And so to just present an array of Black composers, this yearly celebration is really important to showcase the wonderful music that's out there from the Harlem Renaissance to today. I mean, there's just so much beautiful music. It actually is hard to choose. So sometimes I just go with something and I love it and I think it fits with the program. And then, and we're performing Trevor Weston again in June. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah. Our last composer on the program tonight spent most of his career right here in the tri-state area, Montclair, New Jersey, George Walker, who passed away just a few years ago. We did a special on George Walker recently on WQXR, and the piece we're about to hear is his first string quartet. Trevor, did you know George Walker?
I met George through Trilogy and Opera Company. I don't know if you know this company in Newark, and they had a reception in his honor, and I went, and I was a little bit of fanboy. He's a very, as you know, he was very calm person, so it was nice to talk to him, but he was very open, I felt, about like his career and things that he did, and like out of nowhere he signed a CD and gave it to me. I thought, wow, that's very nice. And I knew of him and knew of his work. In fact, I met his son because he's a composer, and we had pieces on a concert together a long time ago. But yeah, I met him a couple times.
Well, 1945, George Walker became the first African American to play a recital in Town Hall. And the very next year, he wrote a piece that he dedicated to his grandmother. He called it his grandmother's piece, his string quartet #1. And that movement, very well known, is probably his most popular piece of music. You'll perhaps recognize it in the string quartet. Amadi, you're part of this quartet. Tell us about this piece by George Walker.
Well, from what I understand, this first quartet is actually a lot easier than his second quartet. So I'm afraid of the second one already. It is the slow movement that you mentioned. We know that as the lyric for strings, and it's performed very, very often by the string section of any number of orchestras. But the outer movements are very lively. There's a rhythmic motive that appears throughout, let's see, the first and second, but I suppose mostly the first, where there are two dissonant chords, and so he builds upon that. And it's kind of a dance up-down gesture that we get as performers and listeners. It can leave you breathless. There are moments where the rhythm is a little bit on the challenging side to grasp, but again, we appreciate that. Yeah, it's so much, the outer movements are so much more modern sounding than the very sort of tonal middle movement. But Dr. Walker made up for that by writing in all these kind of awkward keys in B major. Oh gosh. So that's kind of a challenge to tune sometimes. But the language is accessible and yet on the cutting edge, especially for, I would say, 1945, right there with all the other, with the Bartoks and all the other composers that were reaching. So yeah, it's very satisfying.
Yeah, well, thanks for bringing this program to us, Trevor Weston, Liz Player, the Harlem Chamber Players. We're gonna close out this program with the string quartet #1 by George Walker, recorded live in the Green Space. George Walker String Quartet #1. He composed that music in 1946. I'm Terrance McKnight here with the Harlem Chamber Players String Quartet, joining us here in the green space for this Black History Month celebration. During tonight's program, we heard music by Jessie, Montgomery, Trevor Weston, Florence Price, Carlos Simon. We closed with George Walker. Now, if you want to know more about some of the programs that are coming up at the Green Space, sign up for our newsletter. You can always find out what's happening at the Green Space by going to thegreenspace.org. Oh, we've gotten so many comments. Thanks to those of you who have written in, expressing your joy for tonight's program. It's just been delightful bringing you this program tonight with the Harlem Chamber Players, who will be back in the Green Space this coming summer. So we look forward to that. Liz Blair, thank you so much for a wonderful program. Amadi, thanks for joining us. Trevor Weston, we enjoyed your piece. Liz, just tell us a little bit about going forward with the Harlem Chamber Players. What do we expect?
Well, we're gonna be back in May with music by Adolphus Hailstork, 3 quintets, and then in June we bring a larger group, an orchestra conducted by Amadi Azikiwe, featuring mezzo-soprano Janae Bridges. That will feature Jessie Montgomery Starburst, Alice Coltrane's Prima for harp and strings, the world premiere of Adolphus Hailstork's Tulsa 1921, commemoration of the 100th anniversary of the Tulsa Race Massacre, and Trevor Weston's The People Could Fly, which is based on an African-American folktale.
Yeah. Trevor, I want to ask you just one question before we go. Performers, I think, have had a very tough time not being able to get out in front of audiences. Composers, being away from the public, perhaps a different thing for you. I'm wondering, have you gotten commissions during this time over the last year? Are you seeing an uptick of folks looking for music after we're able to assemble?
Actually, yes, there has been an uptick, and I've had a few commissions. In fact, after this, an hour from now, there's a choir in California that's performing a piece that I titled Martyrs, and it's in response to Black Lives Matter, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and COVID, because in both situations, people died because of losing their breath. So I kind of commingle those issues, and so I've had a lot of activity and people who have time to do research on composers. So it's been very nice, but it's difficult not hearing music live, because it's the acoustics of the natural world that are so inspiring, and the communication of humans.
Amadi, perhaps I spoke for you. I'll let you speak for yourself. You're a performer. Where have you found some refuge in not being able to get out there and touch the public?
Well, the first thing I did was take about 5 weeks off. And, I think at any given time pre-pandemic, most of us needed to take at least some time off anyway, but just weren't doing it. So I think I rested for a good amount. And then I found that I just busied myself, not with any great effort towards doing so, but I think artists are just naturally creative. And so many of my friends and colleagues were finding independent projects to do, going back and learning stuff, you'd always wanted to learn. So now is your chance. But the connecting with people is just, there's no way around it. There's no substitute for it. So, and I know for sure Liz picked up on that, and immediately was like, we're going to try to find some ways and places for you all to get together. And I've got a couple of friends, and Liz knows about this already. One lives in Leonia, New Jersey. Hey, Janie. So she hosted Front Lawn Chamber Music. So on the nice days, she informed me a couple of weeks ago that I went out to Leonia 23 times during the summer and early fall. And my friend Nina Lee in Brooklyn, she and her husband also hosted. So I went there fewer times, but probably a total of about 30 times. Just got together with friends and played chamber music. And I saw people doing that in Central Park. People, you know, artists, everybody just about that I know found a way to just go make music.
Yeah.
So yeah, it just it happens. We don't, there's no way to know that you would do that unless there was something like this going on. But yeah, I think most of us, the overwhelming majority of us, found a way to just keep playing.
Yeah, something like this really shows how passionate music making and connecting with audiences we all are. So thank you all for joining us for tonight's program. Again, sign up for the newsletter from the Green Space. You'll be up to date as to what's coming up next. Warm thank you to the Harlem Chamber Players. Thank you, Liz Player, for keeping all of this together, being here with us for tonight, and for sharing this time with us this evening. Be well, everybody. Stay safe. Have a wonderful night. And you can always join me at WQXR.org or 105.9 FM in New York City.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Good night.